Just as no one can be forced into belief, so no one can be forced into unbelief. One day, in retrospect, the years of struggle will strike you as the most beautiful. The great question that has never been answered, and which I have not yet been able to answer, despite my 30 years of research into the feminine soul, is what does a woman want? The intention that man should be happy is not in the plan of creation. We are never so defenseless against suffering as when we love. He that has eyes to see and ears to hear may convince himself that no mortal can keep a secret. If his lips are silent, he chatters with his fingertips. Betrayal oozes out of him at every pore. I cannot think of any need in childhood as strong as the need for a father's protection. Being entirely honest with oneself is a good exercise. We are never so defenseless against suffering as when we love. Where does a thought go when it's forgotten? A woman should soften, but not weaken a man. Experience teaches us that the world is not a nursery. Future ages will produce further great advances in this realm of culture, probably inconceivable now, and will increase man's likeness to a god still more. It is impossible to escape the impression that people commonly use false standards of measurement. Words have a magical power. They can bring either the greatest happiness or deepest despair. It is that we are never so defenseless against suffering as when we love, never so helplessly unhappy as when we have lost our loved object or its love. He does not believe that does not live according to his belief. When making a decision of minor importance, I have always found it advantageous to consider all the pros and cons. Everywhere I go, I find a poet has been there before me. Religion is a system of wishful illusions together with a disavowal of reality. Life, as we find it, is too hard for us. It brings us to many pains, disappointments, and impossible tasks. In the depths of my heart, I can't help being convinced that my dear fellow men, with a few exceptions, are worthless. Words are capable of arousing the strongest emotions and prompting all men's actions. The voice of the intellect is a soft one, but it does not rest until it has gained a hearing. The ego refuses to be distressed by the provocations of reality, to let itself be compelled to suffer. Neurotics complain of their illness, but they make the most of it, and when it comes to taking it away from them, they will defend it like a lioness her young. In mourning, it is the world which has become poor and empty. In melancholia, it is the ego itself. One might compare the relation of the ego to the id with that between a rider and his horse. It is easy to see that the ego is that part of the id which has been modified by the direct influence of the external world. Children are completely egoistic. They feel their needs intensely and strive ruthlessly to satisfy them. Analysis does not set out to make pathological reactions impossible, but to give the patient's ego freedom to decide one way or another. The functional importance of the ego is manifested in the fact that normally, control over the approaches to motility devolves upon it. Towards the outside, at any rate, the ego seems to maintain clear and sharp lines of demarcation. At the height of being in love, the boundary between ego and object threatens to melt away. The repressed merges into the id as well, and is merely a part of it. Originally, the ego includes everything. Later, it detaches from itself the external world. There is no doubt that the resistance of the conscious and unconscious ego operates under the sway of the pleasure principle. The ego represents what we call reason and sanity, in contrast to the id, which contains the passions. Neurosis is the result of a conflict between the ego and its id. The repressed is only cut off sharply from the ego by the resistances of repression. It can communicate with the ego through the id. The ego, feeling we are aware of now, is thus only a shrunken vestige of a far more extensive feeling. The ego is first and foremost a bodily ego. It is not merely a surface entity, but is itself the projection of a surface. Everyone has wishes, which he would not like to tell to others, which he does not want to admit even to himself. The virtuous man contents himself with dreaming that which the wicked man does in actual life. We are what we are because we have been what we have been. Dreams may be thus stated. They are concealed realizations of repressed desires. The ideas so far produced are insufficient for the interpretation of the dream. The dream is a sort of substitution for those emotional and intellectual trains of thought. Self-deception is a plant which withers fast in the pellucid atmosphere of dream investigation. Being entirely honest with oneself is a good exercise. If youth knew, if age could. Love and work are the cornerstones of our humanness. The scope of one's personality is defined by the magnitude of that problem, which is capable of driving a person out of his wits. When inspiration does not come to me, I go halfway to meet it. Before you diagnose yourself with depression or low self-esteem, make sure that you're not surrounded by fools. Unexpressed emotions will never die. They are buried alive and will come forth later in uglier ways. Immorality, no less than morality, has at all times found support in religion.